Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special edition of Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. Cambodia now is in the middle of hosting the ASEAN, the 21st ASEAN Summit, and many other related summits, including the Asia Summit. And one of the special events that, for the first time, the ASEAN Chair is organizing is an event called the ASEAN Global Dialogue, where we are able to bring the head of the top 5 multilateral international financial institutions to come and have a dialogue with the ASEAN leader and East Asia leader. And I just have the pleasure and the opportunity to welcome on a very short notice a special guest, Mr. Anoop Singh. Anoop, so welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here and to be talking to you in particular.
Yes.
Thank
you know, the IMF represent quite a major role in this global financial setting, and I'm so happy that the IMF are able to come and join the ASEAN Global Dialogue, which will take place tomorrow. So on that note, perhaps I'd like to ask you to say a bit about your background so that the audience have a feel of it, where you're coming from.
Siphana, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Well, I'm from India. I have worked a bit in India. I've been in the IMF for a long time. In the last 10, 12 years, I've worked both on Latin America, what we call Western Hemisphere in the IMF, and Asian countries. I've lived in Asia a lot also. And most importantly, I'm very happy to be here.
Well, so the region, you are from the region, you've been working on the region. So I think you're the right person for me to engage in this dialogue. Let me just set a bit the context a bit. You know, the East Asia Summit is taking place in a moment where the world is a little bit, I would say, turbulent time, if I can exaggerate a bit. But perhaps you can set the tone a bit, you know, on the global dimension, you know, where things are. And then later on we can see how does the ASEAN, the East Asia, is linking to that.
Well, thank you. Well, you know, we're in a very historic situation. We're trying to have a recovery, a global recovery. It is the emerging markets that are leading the recovery, not the advanced economies. It's probably the first time in the post-war period that emerging countries are leading it.
Interesting, interesting. And in the ASEAN in East Asia, you know, what is the role of the IMF in recent years, for that matter, particularly in the context of this fast-growing emerging economy? How is your relation with the IMF?
Well, you know, we've had links across many dimensions.
Yes.
We have our annual consultations, Article 4.
Article 4, yes.
We have a lot of technical assistance to some countries.
Yes.
The ASEAN is a big region.
Yes.
It has a population, I think, of 600 million.
Yes, indeed.
It's a diverse group.
Yes, yes.
Some receive technical assistance. We call them the frontier countries, like yourselves.
Yes.
Tomorrow's emerging markets. Many give technical assistance, and we try to engage on both sides.
Yes, yes. So the IMF is, in this case, working quite a bit with the regional mechanism, like the Chiang Mai initiative, for example.
We've been very supportive of it.
Yes.
As we've learned over the years, surveillance is the best way to avoid a crisis.
Yes.
And therefore, our focus is on surveillance and Article 4 consultations, and that is why we are so supportive of the AMRO institution,
yes,
which is starting surveillance for ASEAN.
Yeah, the AMRO is fully operational now, right?
I think over a year now.
Yes, over a year, in Singapore.
Yes.
And how is the relation with the global surveillance? How does the AMRO work with the IMF in that
Well,
context?
they are building it.
Yes.
We will be meeting them indeed next week in Seoul,
yes,
where there will be a meeting of the deputies,
yes,
of ASEAN, and the IMF will also be there, and we will exchange views on the global situation,
yes,
but most importantly, we'll get the views of AMRO and those of the ASEAN community,
yes,
on where the region is.
Yes. What is your view, having handled so much on the region? You know, what is your view now, the prospect of growth is there a risk that there is some linking to Europe, for example, or is that could we say that we could decouple a bit from there?
There are many ways to answer that. I would say one thing first. We are learning, and the world is learning, great lessons from Asia and from ASEAN countries.
Yes.
If you look at the last 10 years, you see how ASEAN countries, Asian countries, have improved all the fundamentals in the corporate sector, in the financial sector, debt equity ratio. So there are great lessons to be learned from.
Yes.
And then looking ahead, cooperation is very important, integration is very important, and the ASEAN community has set itself important targets and objectives to form the ASEAN Economic Community by 2015.
Yes.
And they also have broader objectives of connectivity.
Yes.
And now I believe they're trying to increase integration also among the ASEAN plus 6 countries.
Yes.
So I think this is all the right approach, because cooperation and integration, I think, constitute the lessons of how the world can continue to have a sustained and stronger recovery.
We are very happy because during this summit we'll be launching the ASEAN Regional Economic Comprehensive Economic Partnership with the ASEAN Plus 6, and that will be the whole thing will be equating about 3 billion in terms of market size. It's unbelievable, So I see here trade investment, for that matter, is a big driver in the sub-regional context in that sense. Where do you see China in this whole thing here, in terms of growth driver? Would you worry that they may overheat, it could affect us? How do you see that?
China is very important in this equation for many reasons.
Yes.
In the near term, we've been looking very carefully at how China is doing.
Yes.
And our experts tell us that China is not facing a hard landing.
Okay.
In fact, in the last 2 quarters, growth has somewhat picked up. And as we remember, China has this 12th five-year plan.
Yes.
It has now an objective of 7.5% of growth. And that's because China wants to have a better quality, more sustainable growth rate. Beyond that, as you look at China in the global economy and in Asia, China has been the hub of the supply chain. This is why trade within Asia has increased so much in the last 10 years. But much of this is anchored on exporting to advanced economies.
Yes. Do you see a bit in the reshifting a bit toward the sub-region in that context?
You see, that is the next stage for Asia, is to anchor its trade more on demand within Asia, and not mainly as a supply chain to advanced economy.
You're right. I'm more a trade person, so I can really relate, and it's music to my ear that you are stressing trade as a driver of growth. But you did mention something that I really want to touch on, is on sustainable development. I think we talk a lot about that, but inclusiveness is also very important in this whole notion of sustainable development. Does the IMF have any lesson from many other countries, from other regions, that you could share with us, particularly on inclusiveness? How do we make sure that growth does not just, stay up there, and we have to make sure it filters down?
Yes. On that I'll make 2 points.
Yes.
The first is the evidence shows that in many Asian countries, inequalities have increased in the last 10 years.
Yes.
We look across the world, look at Latin America. You will see in Latin America in the last 10, 15 years, inequalities have in fact declined.
Interesting.
And so it's important that these inequalities are addressed in a sustainable way. The good news is, I am convinced there is a strong consensus politically and beyond that to address inequalities. If you look at what the leaders are saying across Asia, in this country, in China, in Singapore, Indonesia and India, the need to develop more inclusive growth, to address inequalities, this has become a very key objective of Asia. And it is right.
How do you go about it? Because a lot of people talk about inclusiveness, but it's hard to tie down, at the real plus 20. You know, now we're talking about the post MDG 2015, the high-level task force in UN. But from the IMF, the monetary side of it, how do you see inclusiveness? How does it translate, you know, practically to policymaker in country like Cambodia, for example?
You see, it's an issue that has to be addressed country by country. There are some common issues.
Okay.
But I do not want to say there's one issue.
Okay, fair.
Many countries in Asia, in ASEAN, in Cambodia, they're focusing on developing infrastructure,
Okay.
boosting labor productivity,
Okay.
improving health and education. Those are the infrastructure areas.
Yes.
Beyond that, I would say equally important is to ensure that your financial sector gives access to all communities, building access to the poor.
Financial
is very
inclusion.
important. Financial inclusion must be
Yes.
a mirror image
Yes.
of your total objective.
That's the one of the thematic of the Mexican presidency for G20.
You know, there are many lessons also from Latin America.
Yes.
We see also the emphasis in Mexico and Brazil, other countries place on conditional cash transfers.
Yes.
It's a more targeted mechanism for social support,
Mhm.
provided it is based on the recipients sending their children to school
Mhm.
and the mothers having medical checkups and other factors. So there are many policies,
Yes.
and Asia, I believe, is moving ahead
Yes.
with some of these.
Is there say for example, Cambodia, we are in a few more years we will graduate from the least developed country status. We'll be moving to at least a lower middle income. Growth-wise important, you know, but how do we make sure that a country that is still emerging, where infrastructure is still building up, you know, there's a lot of tension between how do you use your resource, right? Competing pressure. What is your recommendation in that case?
You know, on that, first the good news. If you look at the last 10 years,
Yes.
Cambodia has been growing by close to 8% on average.
Yes.
Per capita, incomes have tripled, I think.
Mm.
So you're right, Cambodia does represent
Yeah.
tomorrow's emerging market.
Yes.
But as you say, there are difficulties, there
Yes.
are concerns of inclusion.
Mm.
There is, for example, in Cambodia and other countries, a divide
Yes.
between the urban sector and the rural sectors.
Mm.
But I do believe the policies are building up infrastructure that are targeted at addressing this divide that there is
Mhm.
between the urban and the rural.
Yes.
Transportation, education, schooling, other infrastructure, it's all part of that.
Mm.
Bringing investment in,
Yes.
ensuring you have a framework that the investment that comes into Cambodia, into Asia, goes into sustainable areas
Yes.
and not just into what I would call the short-term hot money areas. That's the challenge.
Yeah, hot money. I think, you know, in the case of Cambodia, we find that now there are many emerging sectors that 3-4 years ago we would not even dream of. For example, the rubber sector, we now have 200,000 of rubber plantation planted, 2-3 years old already. So in a few years' time, these trees are ready to be tapped, and at $4,000 or $5,000 per metric tons, that's a lot of source of growth. Rice is also another sector that we, from a net importing country now, we move to be a net exporter
Yes,
now.
absolutely.
And I see in the countryside mechanization, all this thing taking place. Are we on the right track in that
I
sense?
think boosting agricultural productivity is very important because that's going to address the rural-urban divide.
Yes.
I think that's a very important focus. It is being done. And education in both rural and urban. There are schools, I believe, in Cambodia that focus on children from the poorest of households.
Yes.
So I think you have the right focus on
Yes.
that. Addressing the divide, working on agriculture, boosting labor productivity. It's all going to boost
Yes.
your contribution, your attainment of higher value added
Yes.
in products.
Yes.
And this is going to help you in exporting.
Let me go back a bit to the ASEAN context, because you know this year we have the great honor to host the ASEAN summit. It takes every 10 years we have that honor, and I'm glad that you mentioned that for the last 10 years, because I was about to ask you that question, that 2002 we had the chairmanship, and now 2012. How have we traveled? And from your response, we're doing fine. But the IMF and ASEAN, right? Because the objective of the ASEAN Global Dialogue is to see how can the IMF contribute toward the building of the ASEAN economic community, of the ASEAN community in itself. And you mentioned quite interestingly the connectivity.
Yes.
Could you expand a bit about this connectivity?
You know, it's all part of building integration in the community. It is already a major objective of the ASEAN. They're looking at improving integration in trade.
Yes.
Connectivity is also going to boost integration in services, in infrastructure, in transportation. So I think the challenge is cooperation and integration is an important lesson that the world should be learning from ASEAN. This is being built and we're trying to support it as much as we can.
Public-private sector, you mentioned infrastructure. I think that public-private sector partnership is very important. Any lesson learned from the IMF on that one?
I think you need to attract private investment in many important sustainable areas. In some countries, especially in what I call the frontier countries, you need a public infrastructure to catalyze and to attract the private investment. So two go hand in hand, but very often public investment is needed in some areas before you can attract the private investment. And then there are these PPPs, public-private partnerships, which have worked well in some countries. They work reasonably well in Latin America, and many countries now in the ASEAN community are trying to develop and take them forward. It must go hand in hand.
So I think from the master plan of connectivity, it's a lot of effort, particularly, development partner, China, Australia, Japan, US, they're all making effort to try to contribute to this connectivity process. But I think to me, connectivity intra-ASEAN is not enough. We have to reach beyond just ASEAN, in railroad, in sea, air link, that sort of thing. And we are having the ASEAN-India partnership. We try to elevate into a strategic partnership. Where do you see, in this case, India, coming into the partnership there?
I think, from what I can understand, India is very interested to do so. There are lessons from both sides. India will learn lessons from ASEAN. ASEAN can look at what India has done in information technology, for example.
You're right. And agriculture, for that matter.
And agriculture. And so there are a lot of lessons. You put all this together, you're looking at a region, as you said, I believe, has more than half the world's population. And therefore the integration in this wider area is very important for exchanging views, lessons, trade, services, and learning from each other.
Service is important. For me, I think in economic integration, I find that tackling the free flow of good is much easier to tackle. But when you start moving to area of, like for example, trade facilitation, that's another dimension that we need to tackle. The WTO, for example, Pascal is trying to push on at least the low-hanging fruit, trade facilitation. But I think that the biggest challenge is on the service sector. What do you see on that one?
I think you're rightly summarizing economic history. In many ways, trade integration comes first and service follows. Asia has done a lot with trade integration, and that is why moving ahead with services is now what is now on the agenda to move next.
So service is on track. I think the big challenge is how do we speed up accelerate a bit the negotiation, which I find a bit slow as compared to reduction of tariff. So I think.
I think one reason is that in many countries, not only in Asia, the service sector has been more protected than other sectors. It's a legacy from the past. It takes a while to bring your protection down. It's come down in many goods areas, It's now beginning to come down in services,
Yes.
and Asia is going step by step,
Yes.
building the consensus. Most importantly, you need to ensure there's social consensus to do it.
Yes. It's interesting because, you know, for this summit, the leader have adopted the declaration on the movement of people.
Yes.
And I think this is a fundamental step, you know, stepping stone toward the economic community, you know. I find that sometimes, you know, journalists, they cover a lot, they love to cover the summit and everything. But I say, you know, you guys should cover also the small step done by the small, incremental thing. Like, for example, when you have the senior official working to get a visa free, you know, within the region, it's no news because it's so technical. But when you look at that, the possibility of a Cambodian woman or a Laotian woman who could fly without visa to Bangkok or to Singapore, and then, you know, buy stuff, you know, not a lot, but 3 or 4 or 5 suitcases, and coming back, you know, and do some trade there. And you multiply by the thousands of people who travel every day. The economic ripple effect is awesome.
Absolutely, and that's why flights are full all over Asia.
Yes. So, I think we're coming to the end of the show, unfortunately. 30 minutes are going very fast. But before we finish, I want to touch on something that's quite dear to me, which is the youth. You know, Cambodia is a very young population. Inclusive growth is important, sustainable development important, our economy is quite open. But the challenge is that we have to create jobs. You have 200,000-300,000 15, 16-year-old entering the workforce. What's the lesson of other countries?
Let me first say that this is your strength.
Thank
you
you
have
very
a young
much.
population.
Thank you very much.
You will get a demographic dividend,
Yes.
and therefore it is a strength you have.
Yes.
Now clearly, jobs are needed.
Yes.
What we've learned from research, from other evidence, other countries, is that trade integration helps create jobs.
Yes.
And this is exactly what is happening in ASEAN and in Cambodia. And this is going to help jobs. But this is a real positive that Cambodia has. And as you look at your own focus on investing in schools, in education, in health, building for productivity, and having trade integration, you're creating the infrastructure domestically, you're creating the avenues externally, and the combination of doing both of these things, I'm confident will create jobs.
Well, I feel better because, you know, every day when you meet with the youth, you say, well, uncle, you know, they call me uncle, and they feel quite old. But then they say, we are worried about, our future. So what you tell me that, yes, you should be worried, but it's not all that bad.
I would be positive because you're building the roads externally.
Yes.
You're building the infrastructure domestically. The two are importantly linked.
Yes.
And that's what is needed to create jobs and to ensure you get the demographic dividend that Cambodia will. Congratulations.
What is your last message? Because a lot of young people are watching in the show, and the policymaker will be also watching for the clue. What's your last message to the audience?
My last message is not my own message. I can think of what someone told me some time ago. We're in the 21st century.
Yes.
Asia is leading the global economy. It looks like this is Asia's century.
I think that's a good place to stop because it's on a very high note and very upbeat. And tomorrow we're gonna have a very good discussion, on the future of the region.
I'm looking forward to that very much.
So thank you so much for stopping by and have this chat. Yes.
Siphana, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Well, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of the show, and we have from the short discussion dialogue, we have a good glimpse, but a positive glimpse of the future, not just of Cambodia. And it's clear that sometimes we are a little bit worried that where we're going to create a job. But it looked like this is a positive thing from the IMF perspective. Is a positive thing. We should build on that strength, and the region is also very conducive for our growth as well. So I think we should be looking forward for something quite a bit in the near future. But I think it's also important that we do not rest on our laurel. We policymakers have to really seriously look at the dimension, the integration. 2015 is not far. The leader have decided that 2015 should be December 31st, 2015, to buy us 12 more months. Somebody say about the 1st of January 2015, no. But having said that, 3 years is not far. We don't have a lot of time. We should not rest, and we should push double effort to make sure that the economic integration that will take place in the next few years will take place. And this is something that I would remember from this short discussion with the IMF. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.